Welcome to another edition of The Game. I'm Mark Simon.
And I'm Bob Marks.
And we're here with Jon Mays, the editor of the San Mateo Daily Journal, which has just recently observed its 25th anniversary. So congratulations, Jon. You've been there almost the whole time. And so thank you so much for joining with us today.
Sure, you bet. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to plunge right in. We know it's the middle of an election season. That's a busy, busy time for you and your staff. Let's start with the only real high-profile race in the county, which is the race for assessor, recorder, clerk, and elections chief between David Canepa, the member of the Board of Supervisors, and Jim Irizarry, the chief assistant. And I won't go through all the titles again. You endorsed David Canepa. Give us an idea of why and what went into that decision.
Well, as part of our process for endorsing candidates, we interview them. We have a set series of questions. I have some follow-up questions. The reporter is there taking notes, and he or she, in this case, she, will write a story based on that interview. And then based on that interview, also, we make a recommendation from it. And we try to, if possible, have all the candidates together. And if scheduling doesn't allow, then we have them separately. If there's a question that arises in one, we follow up with the other to make sure that everyone kind of has an equal chance to respond to any allegations or questions that arise from those. And so in that process, Canepa had good responses and showed a particular type of energy that could infuse the office. Jim obviously knows, Jim Irizarry obviously knows the office, but kind of fell short on some of his responses. And so based on that, we felt that David Canepa would be a better choice for voters. And we'll see what happens when the ballots come out.
Now, do you get flack for something like that? I mean, there are people, as you know as well as I do, who are not big fans of David Canepa. I've been accused of that myself, which is not entirely true, but what kind of reaction do you get to something like that? And what, if anything, can you do about it when people are upset?
Yeah, I'm sorry. What was the last part? How do I?
What, if anything, can you do about it if people are upset?
Nothing. I can't do anything about it. I mean, there are people who support certain candidates, and they may be upset that we didn't endorse. But I think as long as you sort of explain that we have a process and we have a right to come up with our conclusion, then most people, can agree to that at least. But, I mean, a part of the disagreement or agreement with our endorsement is part of the process, and people can write letters in and explain why they disagree. And I think that's healthy and good. No one, we didn't get attacked for it. We have in the past at times, but that's rare, and that's just part of the lifestyle that we lead as a journalist. That sometimes people just get a little bit more excited around election time than they need to.
Jon, there's another countywide race that I know you've endorsed, and it's who's going to lead the County Office of Education, Camacho versus Bonini.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us why you decided to endorse Hector.
I mean, it was the same. It's the same situation with the assessor, county clerk, recorder, and chief elections officer races. That based on the two candidates, Camacho seemed to have better responses and is more qualified for that role. It's interesting because both of them have held a similar office on the Board of Education. Chelsea Bonini has the position now, and Hector Camacho had it previously, and now he works for the Office of Education as executive director of, I think it's DEI or something like that. And it just, his responses were a little bit wider ranging and had depth and breadth to it. Chelsea also had some good answers. I mean, I think she knows the job that she's running for, and had some good responses, but the edge went to Hector from our perspective.
A lot of newspapers, increasingly, it seems like, are sort of opting out of endorsements, especially the newspapers that have positioned themselves as nonprofits. Why do it? Because it does require a lot of work. I've been in the office when you've been doing these interviews, and it is It's some work to get these things done and to write them and to do something that you feel is defensible. You could opt out, couldn't you? Why do you think that it's important that the newspaper do this?
Yeah, I mean, the New York Times recently dropped its local endorsements, mainly because it dropped most of its local coverage. I mean, the New York Times is the New York Times. It does cover New York, but obviously it has a larger impact and reach than that. And so dropping that local coverage, they didn't have the knowledge that's needed to, make fully informed recommendations. I think what we do as a business is cover this county as well as we can and all the different issues and people within it. And so that gives us a certain level of expertise in knowing sort of the ins and outs of issues and people who make decisions that affect us. And so, we're not attached to any other entity. We're not labor, we're not a political party. And so we just feel that it's our responsibility to let people know based on our experience and our know-how who we think would be the best candidate and just make that recommendation. So it's sort of, I kind of feel like it's our responsibility to let people know, who we think is best. It's a process that I take extremely seriously. I do a lot of work on it. I've spent a lot of time over the years sort of making sure that I do the work required to make an informed recommendation. And of course, a recommendation is just that. It's a recommendation. And so people can do whatever they want with it. They can throw it in the trash. They can follow it. They can question it all they want. And so it's just out there. And if you choose to follow it, that's feel free.
Do you have any sense of how much influence the endorsements have?
I have no idea. But I've heard people tell me that it's an important endorsement to get. And then others have told me that they don't even care about it. So I guess it all depends on your perspective. But I find it sometimes interesting when I get a flyer to my house with a big Daily Journal endorses whoever. And I was thinking, oh, that's us. That's interesting. So I think it is important. I don't know how exactly important it is, but I think it's recognized as being one that most people want to get.
There's an interesting feeling that comes with that, isn't there? Where you pick up a flyer and you see, something you've written on there and you think, I'm not supposed to be part of the political campaign.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just doing what I do. And suddenly I've been injected into it. It's an odd feeling, isn't it?
Yeah, especially when in an endorsement, at times I will have a positive paragraph or two about the person who we didn't endorse. And to see that on a flyer from the person we did endorse, a quote from us saying that, that they're, have done a good job or something like that, implying our endorsement. But that's political speech and that's protected too. So that's just part of the business.
Yeah.
Jon, you recently wrote an editorial about the Daily Journal's policies vis-a-vis AI and written submissions. Talk a little bit about that.
So one of the things that I do from time to time as in my column is I'll just kind of explain something, how to write a letter to the editor, what a guest perspective is, how we cover certain things, what our coverage area is, just as a way to, when we get questions about it and get repeat, then I figure, well, let's just put it out there and so people know. As far as AI, I had no interest in writing about it, but we started getting more submissions that I suspected were influenced in some way by AI. And so, I never sort of announced any kind of particular policy. I just assumed that people would know that if it was written or heavily edited by AI, that it shouldn't be something that you submit for publication. But we never made that rule public. So that was the intent of the editorial, to make that rule public, to let people know that it's not something that we're interested in having. I think, that rule could shift over time. But for now, that's sort of the rationale behind me writing that.
Why not? I mean, people use AI. sometimes find it writes better than they. What's your objection to people using AI to help them formulate a letter to the editor, as long as it's their genuine viewpoint?
Right. Well, I think I mean, honestly, it's cheating in my opinion. I think using AI to help you write is not I mean, for me at least, it's not ethical. I don't think it's appropriate for our publication. It can be, if you want to use it in your own business or whatever, that's your business. But for me, it has to be something that you've written. And I know that for me, I'm my profession is writing, and so it comes easier for me. But there are ways that you can get assistance, whether it be, I mean, I'll help you out. I'll say, well, this is, where you can improve this letter. So I think too, is that AI can insert some meaning into it that maybe wasn't originally intended. And so it's not a true reflection of that person's point of view. They may read it and go, oh, that's pretty good. That's kind of what I meant. But it's really not what they were thinking. And so you're injecting an artificial viewpoint into your own viewpoint. And I think at this point right now, it doesn't seem legitimate to me. I think you can ask friends, you can ask me, you can ask family to kind of go over your point of view. And so for now, it's just not something that we find appropriate.
You had another editorial.
Excuse me, Bob. Let me follow up on the AI question, because you and I just exchanged a couple of emails of something that's going on in the Fresno Bee, where they're using AI to produce some portions of news stories. A reporter will produce a story, and apparently they think they're enhancing it with AI. And then there's a controversy that has arisen over whether the reporter's name should remain as a byline on the story, which is almost a related issue. But you're a small newspaper with a staff. You're always resource challenged. Would it be tempting to use AI to fill in some of the gaps that may occur from time to time in a story that's being put together by one of your reporters?
No, I mean, not for me. I mean, absolutely not. I mean, having a reporter do the work and then use AI to come up with a perspective, a different perspective for a different audience, just doesn't work for me. That's what the report said that the Bee was doing. McClatchy was doing it. I mean, ostensibly the writing that we do is for everyone. And it's factual for all people. And one of the things, and I talk about this sometimes if this type of topic comes up, is that what we try to do is sort of think of the range of people within the community and how they're reading the stories that we write, whether it be someone who's recently here, an immigrant, or someone who's been here for a long time, someone who just moved here, from Boston, someone who raised their kids here and maybe is 75 or so and sort of is perplexed by all the changes. And we sort of try to think of these sort of fictional characters in a way that sort of represents a general, point of view of our readers, and make sure that we're sort of making that we think that we would make sense for all of them. And that changes over time too, as we encounter different types of people, different types of readers. So I think that reaching a broad perspective is sort of part of our ethos overall. So to streamline that or use AI to sort of change that wouldn't make any sense for us, because we're already trying to reach everyone. So and using AI to sort of shift a point of view of a story, I think, is inappropriate in a workplace. And obviously the reporters think that too. Because they're having a byline strike, you're basically messing with their own work. So yeah, we've had conversations in the newsroom about AI, and pretty much the overall sentiment is we want to stay away from it as much as possible. And I don't think that it would do any work right now to fill the gaps that we have. And I think it would probably be sort of a detrimental road to travel down.
You had another another editorial recently about banning cell phones in San Mateo High School District from bell to bell. I guess currently they don't allow cell phones in the class, but you argued that it should be throughout the whole school day. It seemed to be that the AI editorial and the cell phone editorial are really getting at the value of writing and the value of having social interaction, that those are being lost today.
Yeah.
Talk about that a little bit.
The the piece you referred to, the bell to bell cell phone one, it was a column versus an editorial.
Okay.
And it's my point of view. The argument is that this is a tool that people use in the workplace now, technology and whatnot, and that cell phones are something that people can use as an educational tool. But I think that that's sort of a specious argument. No, not specious. It's sort of it's just a weak argument overall. I think schools should teach children how to think. And I think that teachers should use the tools available to them. Kids are going to use cell phones regardless, and we're all going to use cell phones. We're all going to use whatever technology is available, but we should learn how to do things on our own first and then use the tools. If you abdicate everything to technology, then what are you really learning? And I've talked about this over time when it comes to spelling and grammar. Spelling is important as a building block to words. Grammar is important to building blocks of sentences, to paragraphs, to entire essays, to developing a train of thought, developing an argument, understanding how to influence people through your words. If you abdicate all of these things, you don't understand the language that we're using to communicate with each other. And that's primary education. And there's a reason why it is primary and elementary education, is that we should be learning these things. And if we say, well, we don't need that because we have grammar check and spell check and all these types of things, then what are we really teaching our children? So I think that there should be an emphasis, a higher emphasis, a more robust emphasis on primary education and the tools needed to learn the basics. And then you can use whatever tools you want later in life. Schools say that we're not here, they're not there to solve societal ills. That's true, but they're not there to contribute to societal ills either. So I think it's important that they sort of consider their role in educating our children and take that seriously, which they do. But I think a bell-to-bell ban is the best way to do it. Other districts, this was a legislation that passed, and so districts have to come up with a policy, I think, by July. Other districts are talking about what they're going to do. And in Sequoia, we had a story today about it, is talking about having a more overall in-class restriction versus bell-to-bell. And that's the school board's prerogative. But I personally think that it's important to have bell-to-bell, develop the skills to basically interact well in our society after high school.
We are in an era now, you know better than I do, where local journalism is just foundering. It's just disappearing all over the country. The Daily Journal seems to be on pretty solid ground. Why do you think that is?
Well, it
we're
depends
superior.
on your definition.
We do such a better job.
It depends on your definition of
Because
solid.
you have me as your columnist. I understand.
You're
that.
right.
That's a huge reason why. Yeah.
I mean, there's a good amount of energy in the Daily Journal as far as making sure that we're doing what we need to do. What
is the job of the Daily Journal, you think?
We're essentially explaining what's happening in this county of ours, right? If you want to know what's happening, you read the Daily Journal. If you don't want to know what's happening you go elsewhere. And that's just
not to name names, yeah.
Yeah, that's just a fact. I mean, that's our role, that's our job, and we take it seriously. And we're energetic about it right now. I think the energy that we have sort of papers over a lot of the overall, problems in the news industry. I mean, someone asked me, I was at a neighborhood association meeting last night talking to a collected group of people, and they wanted me to talk about what we do. And one of the questions was, what's the biggest threat, to us right now? And there's two things. It's resources. People feel as if they're informed because they go to Instagram and they read or they see a picture and someone maybe tells them something in 30 seconds or so. And then they forward that or they talk about it and they think that they're informed. But a lot of people don't read as much as they should. So there's the answer is right there. It's social media where people act or seem or feel as if they're informed when they're actually underinformed. And then there's also the resources that social media takes from us. If people spend their time on social media versus reading our paper, then we don't get the resources that we need to continue telling people what's going on. So those are the two things. But I think we've been able to carry forward because people appreciate what we do, and we do get some level of support from the community. We could use more. And I say that a lot. We could use more support, whether it just be people subscribing online or supporting our advertisers or that kind of thing. But I think we're doing okay.
Earlier this week, the Board of Supervisors, on a 3-2 vote, agreed to create a majority needed to pass a sales tax in San Mateo County, yet another sales tax. It seems to me that given the environment that we're in, the high cost of living, given the fact that we've got a sales tax coming up on the ballot in November, regional transportation, that it might have been a little tone deaf for the board to be talking about another sales tax sometime in the future. What's your view on that? And a lot of local communities are also looking at sales tax.
Yeah, it's kind of like last call at the bar. Everyone's sort of trying to get their last little drink in before it's shut down, before we reach our cap of sales tax. Not to get too much into this, but I think with the VLF situation, with the state withholding some money from the county, I think with property transfers being low, and sales tax being lower because of inflation, cities in the county are feeling a lot of financial pain. Also, the elimination of the COVID subsidies over time, which sort of did a lot of things. People are, the government officials are starting to feel some pain. And that's, you referenced the transit measure that was allowed through Senate Bill 63. That's supposed to save public transit in the Bay Area. So there's a lot of asks right now. And I don't feel as if people are feeling particularly rich right now, although the stock market seems to be doing okay for a lot of people. And if you're involved with technology or AI, I think there's some opportunities there. But, the average person, lower middle class, is not feeling super great. So these are some tall orders for people to determine whether they can support additional taxes. We'll see what happens. I mean, these ballots are far away. Maybe some things change in the meantime. The county just agreed 3-2, which isn't, barely got through at some point to see if there could be a tax increase. So we'll see if they actually pursue something like that.
Let's talk a little bit about something else you wrote about, the historic homes ordinance, I guess, for lack of a better way of putting it. You wrote a pretty sharply worded column of your own, critical of the ordinance that the city had put together. First of all, give us an overview of the issue, because it's been going on as a fight in San Mateo for quite a while now, focused largely on one neighborhood, but it seems to have blown up into a citywide thing. And it really is where the question joins, the ongoing debate is joined in this community of change versus preservation, change versus this is the way things used to be. There's no question the community has changed. More traffic, more high-rise, high-density buildings. And I understand why that scares people. but I wonder if freezing everything in place as best you can is the answer. So give us your sense of that larger issue.
Yeah. Um, the historic ordinance update was part of the 2040 general plan in San Mateo. It was when it passed, it was at some point in the future you update the historic ordinance. And ever since I've been around, since 1997, there was a 1989 survey of historic resources that was done, and everyone talked about how it needed to be updated. And so there's been this discussion about the 89 survey being updated since I started. And you know, I'm interested very much in the history of San Mateo. I think it's a unique and interesting place. I think this county has an interesting history from, you know, the Ohlonys to the Grand Estates to the post, 1906 residential boom in a couple cities, and then the suburbanization after World War II. San Mateo has a pretty unique collection of pre-1910 homes. So the first home in San Mateo, the oldest home in San Mateo currently, the Grand Estates have all burned down, and that was part of the origin of San Mateo, is that they wanted to create a fire district in 1893 or 1896, 1899, one of those. I'm sorry, I can't remember.
You should be careful because Bob really stays on top of these.
That's right.
So they wanted to have a fire district, right? Because buildings were burning down. A good thing they did, because 1906, was felt down here, and a lot of these buildings were destroyed. And so they were the ones that were promptly rebuilt were done before 1910. And then after that, it really started the suburbanization. It was sort of a pivot into a new era for San Mateo, the city of San Mateo, but San Mateo County overall. So there's a small collection of homes that were from that era, and they were identified in this 89 survey, which was 37 years ago. And so that survey is no longer, reliable because it happened so long ago. And so as part of this historic ordinance update, it's my belief that they should have started with that survey, updating that survey, and then determining which of those buildings are still around, which are viable, which could be protected. Some have been changed to the point of no longer being historic or, a resource, and some may have even been knocked down. We don't know. We have no idea. So this idea of the historic ordinance survey, though, came out of a battle in the neighborhood of Baywood, which is 1930s, 40s homes. And I'm not going to get too much into that, but basically they wanted to create a historic district, and some people didn't want it, and there was a fight over that. So the idea was, by the city, was to absorb that fight into this ordinance update, and then sort of come up with some rules for how that would go. But that argument took over the entire discussion, and all of this other thing that was really the true history of San Mateo from the founding era was sort of left by the wayside. And so it's my opinion that basically what we do is we cover what happens, and the discussion is such that we write about what's happening. And then if something kind of gets a little bit askew, it's our responsibility as the people who write the first draft of history, and I've been doing it for a third of a century now, kind of stand up and say, well, you guys you're doing this wrong. And so that was the intent of the editorial, was to say, this discussion is no longer working well. It is backwards. It's the opposite of how it should go. And the council, I think, listened and sort of rectified that a little bit, included the 89. So now they're going to update it. But really, this whole discussion was done in the opposite way that it should have, without the proper insight. No one talked to, maybe they did, maybe someone did, but Mitch Postal, who's the president of the San Mateo County History Museum and Historical Association, who conducted the 89 survey, wrote the Book of San Mateo, fought to save the Seven Oaks, the APG and Any House, was never properly consulted about this. And I think that that's a big miss. So that was sort of why I wrote the editorial, because I felt like the discussion was wrong. And I feel that there was, it's not about growth versus growth and housing versus non-housing. This is about the history of the city and sort of preserving who we are. And, the handful of homes, there's 20,000 lots in San Mateo. The handful of homes it's under 150 properties here. We don't even know what status they are. It could be less. It could be 75. That's not going to make a ton of difference when you're talking about, housing versus non-housing. You can put up, condos right next to a historic home. It's fine. You can even do adaptive reuse to a historic home. You can add ADUs and JADUs. You can add second levels as long as you keep the facade. There's a lot of opportunities here, and no one was really discussing that. And I think that was a big missed opportunity on the part of the city. It seems like there's been a little bit of a recalibration with the exploration of the 89 survey. And I expect that I'll probably be a little bit more involved with the discussion as it goes on, because I think that this is important to sort of balance needs and not get wrapped up in the housing versus not housing, YIMBY, NIMBY thing. It's not about that. You can have the preservation and restoration of history while also growing as a city. There's examples all over Europe. I mean, certainly you have historic buildings right next to sky rises. And I think that that's just, there's a more mature and responsible discussion that needs to be had. And I think it's time to have it.
Let's talk a little bit about change. You've been paying close attention to the community for quite a while. How has it changed? And has it changed for the better? I mean, you hear, if not more so than most, from people who are not happy at how things are changing. And the resistance to change is always something that's a news story at one level or another. It's contained within one project or another. How has the community changed, and has it changed for the better?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's changed. I mean, that's just life. All sorts of things change. I think values are changing, and I think needs are changing over time. I think sometimes people believe that something that happened or what was happening 30, the whole thing is that everything is peaceful from a distance, right? And say you go on vacation and you had this awful, awful trip where you got food poisoning and you got lost and all that kind of stuff. But 2 years later, you think, oh, what a great trip that was. We really saw some great things. So you look back at the past and you think it was like better than it really was. And some of it has to do with just your own personal loss, or things are changing in your own life. And it's reflected in that. But I think San Mateo County has always been an interesting, dynamic, ever-changing community. I think, someone was telling me, oh, San Mateo County is very bland. It's not very interesting. There's not a lot going on. And I said, what are you talking? You can go to the park and hear people speaking in 5 different languages within earshot. It's an incredibly diverse, dynamic, interesting place that draws people from all over the world who want to do good things. And that change can be difficult if you are accustomed to something that happened, 30 years ago. But you have to change with the times and have mature, responsible conversations about how to make that change work for everyone. You can't, you can't preserve everything, nor should you. But I think there's a discussion to be had where you respect the past. You understand that change is happening, and you prepare for the future in a way that makes sense for everyone.
Let me ask the same question about our local politics. We've had district elections now. We have different kinds of people. Certainly, district elections has changed the color of who gets elected. There's more diversity than ever. How are the politics of the county changing? It used to be a place that was pretty homogenous when it came to these views. It seems to me anyway, more contested, more contestable. What's your take on that, Jon?
Well, I mean, I think so. I think getting elected and running a government are two separate things, right? And you could be skilled at getting elected and not be skilled at running things. But I don't have, I think it's important to have a diverse group of opinions. I think it's important to have diversity of opinions and diversity of thought and ideas and ways of administering our government. So I think progress has been made when it comes to diversity of thought on our boards and councils, and that's a positive thing. I wouldn't say that just because someone is new or from that they're not as skilled necessarily. I've seen it just depends on the person, right? I've seen skill level vary from all different types of people. 25 years ago, there was people with limited skills on city councils. That hasn't changed. Certain councils have gotten better and more organized. I'll give you an example of, the Belmont City Council. It used to be terribly disorganized and awful, really contentious at every turn. Now is one of the higher functioning, smoothest running cities around. So it's a matter of sort of working through change and having good leadership, the leadership who listens and understands that diverse points of view. You can agree, you can disagree, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a fight at all times. You can incorporate other people's points of view.
Well, going full circle back to the process of your endorsements, do you feel an obligation to, when you're doing that thing, the whole endorsement process, to keep an eye out for diversity? To people would argue that it reflects the diverse nature of the community, which is different than it was certainly 20 years ago. Do you?
Yeah, I
keep
mean,
an
I think.
obligation on it?
Yeah, I think sometimes, we go for the best candidate, right? Sometimes if a council I think diversity of thought on a council is helpful. If there's a group that's not being represented by the current council, then a candidate with that point of view, I think it's a little bit of a leg up. But it doesn't necessarily have to be any other factor except for just, if they're a renter, could be one factor. If they're young, if they have a young family, that could be a factor. Everything is a factor. And I think that having people with different points of view on these legislative bodies is important because it reflects, it's kind of like with our news stories where we think about all the different groups of people who are reading us. A council should be considering that too and have that life experience of understanding what it's like to live the lives of people who live here. And so the more diversity of thought and experience that you have on a council, the better council, I think, overall.
Yeah. What is the hardest thing about what your reporters have to do?
Probably watching those city council meetings, honestly. I don't know. I mean, I think it's just this, Mark, is that, journalism is becoming an expert immediately on a number of different topics. You could go into something, Holly wrote the story about, GPS satellite company in Burlingame, right? And what does Holly know about GPS satellites? I mean, nothing. She knows they exist, right? But she has to come up to speed pretty quickly on the technology so that she can write a story that makes sense for people. So things like that, just having to do that, go from 0 to 60 in a couple seconds and do that twice a day is pretty much a challenge, while also doing it in public where if there's ever, a misphrase or things like that, then, we live in constant fear of getting something wrong because, people read these stories that we write and make decisions based on it and form opinions. And so we want to make sure that that's right. And so we're constantly fearful that we miss something. And so we just have a kind of a low level of anxiety that sort of permeates our day. But that's just the business,
Yeah. Low level, sometimes peaking to a higher level.
Yeah, it depends on what it is, right?
Yeah, one of the favorite letters I ever got about something I wrote began with "Dear Stupid." And I like the fact that they said "dear" first.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, they're probably a dedicated reader, so
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
right. I regret sending that letter to you, Mark.
I did get more than one that said I hate reading your column all the time.
right.
Jon Mays, editor of the San Mateo Daily Journal, thank you so much for joining with us. It's been a great conversation. We appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mark. Thanks, Bob.
Okay.
All right, and Bob, now it's your turn to call me stupid. What's on your mind?
Well, it's
How
become
about
a
that governor's
tradition
race,
here.
huh? Yeah.
It's become a tradition here to talk about the governor's race.
Yeah.
And people are voting as we speak.
Yeah.
The ballots have gone out here in California. As you pointed out in your column yesterday, the four leading Democrats all have significant flaws. But one of those are going to become the next governor. I know you've got some heat about not talking about the two Republican candidates.
Yeah.
And yet, anybody who follows politics knows that whoever the Democrat that emerges in this race, they're going to be the next governor. The Republicans, Steve Hilton, has kind of been the leader in this race, at least in the primary, and he's glib and a talking head from Fox News over the years. But to me, not a real serious candidate here in California. And the other guy, Chad Bianco, has always struck me as kind of a warmer, friendlier Pol Pot.
Oh my God.
Now, in fairness,
how many podcasts will be citing the former dictator of Cambodia?
Yeah,
That's impressive.
And I realize most people have no idea who the hell that is. And I'm not saying that that Bianco is a ruthless dictator who killed millions of people. But
I'm sure he'll be glad to hear that.
Yeah, but there has been an unusually high number of prisoners who died in Riverside County jails over the last period of time. So, whether we like it or not, California is a one-party state. You could blame the Republicans for not really making a case that appeals to the voters. You can blame the Democrats for controlling things and becoming fat and happy. But that's where we are.
Yeah, sort of the undercurrent of the comments I heard, and I did hear a good number of people who were unhappy that I didn't mention the two Republicans in the column, and I'll get to them next week. But the column started off with the sentence, "What a mess," and maybe I should have said, "What a mess the Democrats have made." The fact is, the Republicans are bystanders to this process, and the fact that one of the two of them are at the top of the polling has almost nothing to do with the positions they're taking, and everything to do with the fact is, you can get 35% of the vote in this state if you're a Republican. Yeah. That's enough to win to lose in a landslide. It's not enough to win the seat, and that's what these numbers reflect. That it's essentially a product of all the Democrats running and none of them emerging. And the Democrats who could have run and put this race away early on all opted not to run. And that's a whole different kind of profile and courage, I suppose. Yeah. But, the fact is that none of the Republicans are espousing positions that are mainstream positions in California. And they like to think in the way that Hilton and Bianco have talked about it at the debates, and on behalf of the public, Bob and I watch the debates, so you don't have to. They want to act as though finally California is coming to its senses and rejecting this one-party rule. And the answer is no, they're not. It's just a menagerie of people, none of whom are strong enough or assertive enough to put this race away. And it is an interesting collection of people who, in a normal circumstance, if a Kamala Harris had run, or an Eleni Kounalakis or Senator Padilla, they might not even be in the race anymore, let alone be factors in this campaign. The one thing that bothers me, and you're much more of an expert on polling than I am, is when they say the undecided is 18%. I just don't believe that number. I think that number is much, much higher. And you know as well as I do the way they ask the question, if you had to decide today, and your first response to it, I don't know. Well, yeah, but if you had to decide. And so people pick a name because they have to in the context of the poll. The other thing I'm hearing now from other people, none of whom seem to feel they need to write to me, they just call me instead, is they're all going to hang on to their ballot until late, which I think this is one of those times when it makes sense given everything that's happened. And they're going to see who is ahead in the last poll among the Democrats. And I think if it's any sort of a reasonable sampling and it's just random, you could see a very late surge to one person, depending on where they are in the last poll.
Yeah, I see the race as Becerra. I don't know. We saw in the last debates that everybody's ganging up on him, and that's always a clear indication that he's the one that's the front runner.
Right.
He seems to be, to me, he's the more of the same candidate.
Yeah.
Steyer and Porter are both kind of uber progressives, and Mahan is sort of a moderate Democrat in a lot of ways, and Becerra seems to be kind of the safe choice. He has a lot of baggage. I don't think he's distinguished himself either as Attorney General or as HHS Secretary. But at this point, and things can change, we'll see how the attacks on him play out. But at this point, he looks like he's the one that the Democratic Party as a whole in California is saying, yeah, I guess he's the best choice out of these candidates.
Well, he's the least objectionable, I guess. He's in sort of the classic political profile. He is the quintessential candidate for governor, in that he's got a certain set of credentials that are actually specifically relevant to the job. I mean, part of the problem is Steyer's a CEO, and I'm sure I've said on this show before, the idea that a CEO can run government is to me is a myth. It's not the same kind of skill set. Politicians have to persuade people. CEOs just have to give orders, and it's a whole different ballgame. And how many times in his career has Steyer said to his staff, "Well, we're going to do this," and somebody said, "Yeah, well, we're the opposition party, we're not doing it." It just doesn't happen. Porter is a member of Congress, or was a member of Congress. It's revealing to me that virtually none of her colleagues have endorsed her. Mm-hmm. But also, being in Congress, this was the same problem Swalwell had, along with several others, which is being a member of Congress has no relationship to the job of being governor. Right. And then you've got Mahan, who's got relevant experience, but he's so closely tied to the tech industry. And I'm convinced the next 5 years, the single most important issue is going to be regulation of AI and social media and how they're affecting our world. I mean, we've got a whole generation of kids growing up with screens, and we have no idea what this is doing to them, how it's creating social disruptions, how it's creating social disruption of their brain patterns. And we need to address that. And there are lawsuits now about whether or not Facebook, for example, knew that it was creating something that was addictive and promoted in that way. So I think regulating tech may be the most important issue in the next few years. And there's no reason to think that this guy's going to be any tougher on them than anybody else. And he's getting all of his money from them. So it's, there's a summary. You don't have to read the column now. Good news. But it is, maybe it's just a reflection of the times we're in, that we're in a time of transition. And these are transitional figures. And we're waiting still for somebody to emerge as somebody who can take us somewhere better, I guess.
It seems like we've been waiting for that for quite a long time.
Well, Bob, it's finally time for you to step up and run for office.
Yeah, exactly.
I wouldn't do it.
Exactly what we need.
Yeah, I wouldn't do it because I can't stand those assholes in the press corps.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, listen, always a pleasure. Good to see you again, Bob. And out there in podcast land, thank you for tuning in. Frank Bravo, thank you for being our the guy who makes this happen. And I'm Mark Simon.
I'm Bob Marks.
And that's it for the game this time. We'll be around again soon.